Back here with the week 2 problem set for the Sigma group. We're going to be finishing up this problem set, going through problems 7 through 12 here. If you look at number 7, we're looking at this original inequality of 1/2 is less than the cube root of x is less than 2/3. And again, we have 5 answer choices in front of us, so let's take a look at them to see how it can help us. Letter C says 2/5, and we should always start with C when they're in order like this. So we want to start by taking the cube root of that to find out what the cube root of x is going to be. And when you do that, you get 0.736, which is obviously greater than the 2/3, so answer choice C is out. And since that's greater, we want to go right ahead to look at B. Now you might jump to A if you want, but I decided to go with looking at B here. So I'm looking at the cube root of 1/3. And when you do that, you get 0.69. And you'll notice you're getting closer to 2/3, which, if you forget, is 0.67, but not quite there. So A is probably the answer, but we got a second here just to check. Plug in the cube root of 1/4, and we get about 0.63, telling us that C is our answer for number 7. It's a nice straight line. Number 8, we're looking at what fractional part of the original amount that Kevin originally had does Taylor have? Well, Taylor got 1/4 originally, so we know we're starting with that 1/4. And then it also says that Joe then gave Taylor 1/2 the bracelets that Kevin gave to him. Well, that's not 1/2 of the overall bracelets, that's 1/2 of 1/3. So we're going to come in and do 1/2 times 1/3. And go from there. Now, order of operations says we multiply here first, so we have 1/4 plus 1/2 times 1/3 is 1/6. And at this point, my guess, you should go right to the calculator, or get the least common denominator of 12 and go from there. When you do this in the calculator, you get 5/12, which matches to answer C. Now, you could have just as easily solved this problem using a plugging in value for the variable. You could have made up a number of bracelets that Kevin had originally, and just make sure it's divisible by 3 and 4. So, for instance, a number like 60 would have been a good idea to start with. There are other numbers, but that would have been something to try. And if you might want to take a pause the video and try that, and see if you can get it that way too. In number 9, we have m equals 3x over y over 2z. And in this problem, we want to know what 1 over m is. Well, we're looking at a number divided by a fraction, and this is a keep, change, flip problem, where we keep the first number the same, that's 3x. We change this division to multiplication, and we flip the bottom fraction, making that 2z over y. Now, if we look at this, it looks like a fraction times a whole number, but we can make it a whole number. We can make the whole number into a fraction by putting it over 1, and that makes it a little bit easier to deal with, giving us 6xz on top over y, but that's m. So if we want 1 over m, all we have to do is take the reciprocal of this guy here, giving us y over 6xz as our answer, which is answer choice B for number 9. Clear the screen here so we can work on 10 through 12. Looking at 10, we're talking about x and y, and we want to know what's the smallest possible value of x squared plus y squared. Now this isn't as easy as it originally looks, because when we square the y value here, when you square the y value, it's going to become positive. So even though you want the smallest possible value here, you're not going to pick -9, even though -9 would be the smallest y value. Instead, you're going to pick you're going to be picking -1 for y. So for the x, the smallest y value that is going to work for you is x equals 1. And for y, since we're squaring it, you're going to choose -1. So when you look at x squared, you're really talking about 1 squared. And when you're talking about y squared, you're talking about -1 squared. Okay? So when we look at 1 squared, that's obviously 1. And when you square negative 1, you end up getting 1 as well. So the smallest possible value here is 2. That's a 1. Which then begs the question, why isn't 2 one of the answer choices? So that's a my bad there. I wrote all these problems, so eventually I'm going to be making a mistake along the line somewhere. But the answer to number 10 should be 2. So sorry about that. Looking at number 11, this is one of those number line problems where you aren't given the number line. We have 0, and it says b is less than 0, and also a is less than 0, and it also says a is less than b. So that means a is going to be to the left of b. And we have d over here on the other side, which is greater than 0. And we want to know negative 2a squared plus d. And we want to know which of the following must it be. Now, in this problem, I could make up values for a and d. Oops, I forgot the b in there. Plus bd. I could make up values, but that might give me more than one answer choice. So instead, let's just look at a sign analysis, meaning is it positive or is it negative? So for instance, if I look at a, that's a negative number squared. And if I look at b, that's a negative number, whereas d is a positive number. Well, order of operations says look at this part here first, the negative squared, which becomes a positive. So that's going to be a negative 2 times some other number, which is going to be positive. And here I have a negative times a negative, so I'm going to be adding a negative to that. So if I look at that, that number has to be negative, telling you that my answer to 11 is going to be B. Now you may have chosen values for this and gotten some of the other answers, such as a rational or an integer or even divisible by 3. But if you choose numbers like, say, negative pi for A or negative rad 3 for B, you'll find that they won't turn out to be rational or integers. And that's one of those tricky ones that you just have to think a little bit more about. And if you do choose values, sometimes you have to choose values that aren't the easy ones to work with. So in other words, don't try negative 2 or don't try negative 5, things that might give you multiple answers here. Or just look at the analysis that we did here, look at the signs. Looking at 12, in this problem, I'm going to kind of contradict myself because here I am going to choose a value. For x, since x has to be between 0 and negative 1, I'm going to choose negative 0.5. And for y, which has to be between 0 and 1, I'm going to use a positive 0.5. And we're looking at y squared minus x cubed. Well, squaring y, that's 0.5 squared. That's 0.25. And then when I cube x squared, that's a negative 0.5 cubed, which is going to be a negative 0.125. But since it's really minus a negative, as I call this a superplus. So I'm really adding in this situation, which gives me 0.375. Now if I look at this answer, and then I go to my answer choices, A says negative, so that's out. B says less than y. Well, y is 0.5. C says x, y to the fifth, and D says greater than x, and E says greater than 1. So we are in fact left to decide between B and D in this situation. And while I'm not going to take the time to show you, D is actually the best answer here, because depending on what other value you chose for x, you could end up getting a number that is bigger. Yes, that is bigger than y. And you could choose other values there. For instance, if you chose y to be really small and x to be, negative 0.2, for instance, that you would see that it only works out to be D there. Okay? Hopefully you got through this problem set okay. If you had some troubles, please make sure to comment in the forum, and good luck on this week's assessment.